In 1964, the U.S. was locked in a battle with the Soviet Union, not just for world dominance, but for the heart, soul, and the future of America. Fresh off the heels of the Cuban Missile Crisis, many argued for détente, or accommodation of the Soviets. In a landmark speech, Ronald Reagan made this historic plea.
They say if we'll only avoid any direct confrontation with the enemy, he'll forget his evil ways and learn to love us. But every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then?
And today, America may have arrived at another time for choosing. So what can President Obama learn from President Ronald Reagan? Dr. Sebastian Gorka is chair of military theory at the Marine Corps University. Good morning, Dr. Gorka.
Good morning.
Have we lost our way in this country? Have we ignored the lessons and the dictates of Ronald Reagan? Why do we call terrorists merely military insurgents?
Well, our brave soldiers and Marines haven't lost their way. It's the political elite. We are under a veil of political correctness that is out of control, and we seem to think that declaring victory means you've won, pulling out your troops means you've won, and we seem to think that negotiating with groups that wish to destroy America is going to work. You can't negotiate with totalitarians, whether they're communists in the Kremlin, whether it's Adolf Hitler in his bunker, or whether it's jihadists, and this administration does not understand this kind of war.
What is the lesson of Ronald Reagan with regard to this kind of war, and how do we get back on the right footing in terms of the threat that America faces in this global war on terror?
The greatest lesson is that this is a totalitarian ideology. Just like communism, just like fascism, we are facing totalitarians. This time, it's Islamist jihadis, and the first thing we need to do differently is to talk truthfully about the ideology that drives them. We can't talk about the fact that it's poverty or lack of education. That's ridiculous. If that were the case, half of India would be terrorists. It's an ideology of global domination, of recreating the caliphate, the theocratic empire of Islam. If you're not allowed to speak truthfully about the enemy, how are you going to defeat them? As Sun Tzu said very famously thousands of years ago, to win a war, you must know the enemy. We have to get political correctness out of our analysis of this enemy.
The need to identify the ideology seems to be clear, but what seems unclear, Dr. Gorka, is the motivation behind this White House failing to identify this ideology. What on earth could they be thinking by saying, we're not going to say Islamic jihadism, we're not going to talk about totalitarianism, we're not going to talk about terrorist acts by terrorists? What's the motivation and what's the harm over time?
The harm is huge over time because you literally cannot win a war. If you are banning your FBI agents, your soldiers from learning about the ideology of the enemy, it's going to be very hard to defeat them. Why is this happening? Combination of reasons. We have naive liberal idealism. We have an executive that doesn't believe in American exceptionalism. And also we have a belief that there is no such thing as evil. We have a postmodern secular political elite that refuses to believe in the existence of evil and evildoers. If you don't believe that the communist forces of the Cold War or the fascists of World War II were evil, how would we have defeated them? The same is true today. Dr.
Gorka, one final question. In one sentence, if you could, how do you define the military theory of the Obama administration?
Fantasy, Alice in Wonderland.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, thanks so much for sharing with us today. We hope you come back real soon.
Anytime.